Welcome to the Bright Ideas Podcast, where we share bold insights and real stories for people leaders building cultures and companies that scale. I'm your host, Desiree B. Sharp, keynote speaker and CEO of Color Vision Lab. We're the people and culture consulting firm helping creative businesses design smarter systems and build high-performing teams. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Shamir Duverseau, Managing Director of Smart Panda Labs. If you want to scale your business without sacrificing your culture, this conversation is for you. And if you're exploring ways to elevate your people strategy, DM us the word growth on LinkedIn for a free consultation. Shamir, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Desiree.
Absolutely. Very excited to dive in today. First, I'd love to have you share a little bit more about Smart Panda Labs, and then we can go into just getting a better understanding of what your role as a managing director looks like, the day-to-day.
Sure. So Smart Panda Labs is a digital marketing agency that focuses on high consideration brands in the B2C space. And specifically, we focus on post-click experience. So we don't do any advertising. We don't do any traffic acquisition efforts. Everything we do is about what happens after someone clicks on the ad and helping companies to optimize that experience, both in the short and long term, to really drive profit and value.
So for you as a managing director, what does your day-to-day look like as a leader in the business?
Oh, it's a little bit of everything. So all the way from a very high level to managing just the overall strategy of the business, the direction to where we're going, defining our brand and iterating on that, and our product and iterating on that on a consistent basis so that we can kind of keep up with the market, all the way down to just some administrative tasks, right? Just making sure that bills get paid and invoices get processed and so forth. And then doing client work in between that, right? So helping to lead client engagements, to establish the overall strategy of what we're doing for a lot of our clients. And then obviously coordinating with the members of our team to help execute on that strategy or to help refine that strategy when we need to dig into particular areas of expertise of our particular team members.
In the past year, what's changed the most about how you lead or run your business?
In the past year, wow, that's a great question. I think it's interesting, probably just to give some context, probably about maybe 4 years ago or so, I started doing a lot of reading, just different business books, publications, things I found that people recommended or things I saw that other people were reading. And maybe in the last year or so, I started to reread some of those, thinking that, okay, now that I have a few more years under my belt and have that information kind of floating around the back of my head, I wonder if I'll see some of these things through a different lens. And lo and behold, I have. So I think one of the things I've really applied in the last year is I read a book called Great by Choice by Jim Collins, pretty well-known business writer. And he's written some very well-known books. Good to Great, Built to Last are probably his most famous ones. But Great by Choice is one of his last ones. And what Jim Collins does is he breaks down a lot of research he does into companies that perform well against peer companies that didn't perform well over a set period of time. And he says, okay, what are the similarities among those companies that did well against their competitors? Why did some of these companies really excel in what they were doing and how they were delivering it versus companies that ended up not doing well or even going out of business over the same time frame? And one of the principles he points out in Great by Choice is this idea of first bullets, then cannonballs. So it's the idea of saying, before we kind of waste the big ammo, like the cannonball on firing this large shot, this costly shot and missing, let's just fire a bullet and see like, oh, we fired a bullet, but it was off. It was a little bit to the right. Okay, let's try to adjust that to lift a little bit. Fire another shot. Oh, that was a little too high. It needs to be a little lower. Then you fire the third shot. It's like, oh, okay, we got it. Now I know how to aim the cannonball, right? And now I fire the cannonball and now it hits its target. So that's something I've really tried to adopt, especially over this last year of just iterating on things, of kind of doing a bunch of small tests and kind of seeing, does this work out? Does it seem like it's moving the company in the right direction? Or does it seem like, this isn't really doing anything? So just kind of setting limits on myself of how much time I'm going to spend on it, how much money I'm going to spend on an effort to test it out, and firing those bullets, and then kind of using those to kind of make tweaks and adjustments in our aim as an organization, and then ultimately say, okay, this seems like it's going to work, let's fire the cannonball. And that's really helped us move a lot faster as an organization, kind of adopting that over the last year or so. So that's probably the big thing that's really been of help to us.
Wow, I love that. I'm actually going to check out that book. You said great by choice, great book recommendation for all the people listening to this episode. I think it's very interesting when founders, CEOs, when we have to slow down to process and evaluate what's going on in our market, in our industry, and figure out how to pivot the business so that we maintain viability, sustainability, relevance, with our audience. And clearly, that's what you've done, and why your business is still, doing well today, right? So I've been looking at some of your LinkedIn content, and you've been very inspiring in sharing some of those hard leadership experiences and choices that you've had to make to weather certain storms, whether it's COVID or other things just happening in the economy that have impacted your business. And so, if you're comfortable, I would love to have you share maybe one or two hard decisions or pivots that you've had to make in your team or your business strategy to keep up with certain market shifts.
That's a great question. One of the ones, actually, you alluded to it. You mentioned a couple of LinkedIn posts, and this came about as something that we ended up posting about on LinkedIn. And this was a bit after COVID, as we were kind of pulling out of the pandemic and everything that was happening there. And if you remember, the market during COVID, the job market became crazy. Salaries skyrocketed, quite a bit. And it was hard to find talent at that point at a price point that we could afford. I mean, we're an agency, right? We're not a Fortune 100 company. So what we can pay for a role is not the same as you're going to get for a role if you go work at Disney or Walmart or something like that. So it became very difficult to find that talent at that price point. So you end up thinking, well, I need to compromise because I need to get someone to do this. And, we found good people. They just weren't a good fit for us and what we come to expect and the kind of experience that we want to deliver to our clients. And it ended up causing problems, and it ended up causing more work than it was saving us work. So we had to make a tough decision. We had to kind of say, after we tried this a few times, a few different iterations of different people, of like, okay, we as founders need to come back and say, we're going to take this work back on ourselves. And that's hard, not just because it's hard to let people go, which in and of itself is difficult. I think people think when you hire them, they think there's some like irrevocable covenant that they will never be let go, which that would be nice in a perfect world, but this is far from a perfect world. And ultimately, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. So we can't be put in a position where, well, I'm going to keep you, but that's going to bring the company down. And eventually in 6 months, none of us are going to have a job. Right. So that doesn't make any sense. But the other thing that was hard about that was, has someone who did this work for the organization and then kind of said, okay, now I'm going to focus on doing this other thing. It was hard to feel like you're kind of moving backwards, so to speak, and kind of saying, well, I need to go back to doing that work I was doing before. But we had to come to that realization that that's what needed to happen in order to maintain the brand and to maintain the experience that we felt like we needed to deliver as an organization. So we made that kind of that jump to do that, to get back to doing that work ourselves, more hands-on, and transformation was almost immediate, and it was amazing. Just the amount of work we were able to get done, the quality of the work, how strongly that improved, the camaraderie and unity among the team improved significantly. It just did a number of things for us that was really just critically important. So that was a big pivot. The other big pivot, which came shortly after that, maybe about the same time, is we lost a large client, and we took that as an opportunity to kind of reset, relook at our services and what we offered, and kind of said, what are we really good at and what do we enjoy doing? And we realized that what we're good at is the post-click experience. We were good at experience optimization, conversion optimization. We were good at lifecycle marketing, marketing automation. We were good at technology. What we were not as good at is SEO. We weren't as good as paid advertising, paid search, social media, those kinds of initiatives. So we said, well, why are we doing it, right? And it just so happened that client that we lost was kind of the last client we were doing those particular services for. So we took that as an opportunity to sunset them completely and kind of reposition ourselves as saying, hey, look, we're post-click. That's all we do. And sometimes you get that temptation because someone will come and say, hey, do you guys do this? Do you guys do that? It's like, nope, we don't do that anymore. we can refer somebody. But that's not what we do. But that was another good decision, right? Because that really helps us get a lot more joy out of work because we enjoy what we're doing more. But it also, again, allows us to deliver a better product to a better service to our customer, our clients. And that's really important to us because we consider ourselves a people-driven organization. In fact, our core purpose as an organization is to give people a better story to tell. to give that client a better story to tell, to take a little stress off of them. They have stuff going on at work. They have stuff going on at home. How can we make that a little easier and a little better? And making that shift in our services positioned us better as an organization to be able to give them that better story because we were just better at what we did. And we were able to deliver more value to them.
Wow, so powerful. I can relate to so much of what you shared in that answer, particularly your experience of losing a large client and having to take that moment of deep reflection and of self and the business
Mm.
and understand what's working, what's not working, and then have the gumption to just completely double down on the things that you're really good at and focus on those as your core competencies. And what do they say? The riches are in the niches.
Mhm.
And it's very true. And it's so tempting to kind of go astray, especially when, sales are a little slower or, and you get tempted to kind of just pick up work to be able to meet your revenue
Yep.
targets. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And then there was another piece that you touched on around talent attraction in a very competitive talent market, which is something that companies of all sizes struggle with at some point. And I think there's this misconception with small business owners that we can't attract high caliber talent because we can't compete in salary. But there's so many other reasons why a high caliber employee would choose a small business over a large one, right?
Yep.
You get to, get your hands in a lot of different parts of the business. You learn quickly, you fail quickly, you can grow quickly. There's a lot there. I want to lean into that a little bit.
Yeah.
So during that time, what did you learn about your company, your core values, and what you could offer beyond a higher salary that made your value proposition as an employer attractive to your ideal talent? I guess, what was your thinking, your strategy behind that?
Yeah. So it's funny. After a few years of operation, we sat down and we defined our core purpose and we defined our core values and we wrote down what they were and began to evangelize those across the organization and make sure that everyone's kind of keeping them top of mind. And the first of our core values really speaks to why we founded Smart Panda Labs in the first place, and that's life first. When we started Smart Panda Labs back in 2010, we really wanted an environment where people could spend their time and energy doing what was most important to them while still having their career. So if it was spending time with the kids and being able to drop out of work at the middle of the day to go to a show at the kids' school or a play or something like that, or to run to a doctor's appointment or, wherever the case happened to be, just having people have that latitude. And when we started, remote work was there, but it wasn't that common. So to start a company that was 100% remote at that time was pretty unique. So we really leaned into that for several years. And then when COVID happened, it became a little bit more of a challenge because, well, now all work was remote. So this key point of differentiation where we were kind of a niche at being a remote company, well, all became remote companies. Now it's kind of funny. That's kind of come full circle because now companies are going away from remote and they're doing hybrid if you're fortunate, but a lot of them are saying you need to come back in the office, period. So we're kind of regaining that strength again. But the strength really wasn't necessarily in being 100% remote, right? I think we kind of lost sight of that. 100% remote was a means to an end. The strength was in being life first and being supportive of team members. And when I think about it, some of the team members that we've had over the years, different women who we have on the team that have, had kids, multiple kids while being on the team, you know, we tell them take off however long you take off. And when you come back, your job's going to be here. Like that wasn't a concern. It wasn't an issue. When I think about team members now, again, needing to run out because maybe there's a medical emergency, or as I mentioned, my kid has a T-ball game, or, it's a kindergarten graduation, or whatever the case is, I'll be back online later. We're all adults and we know that you'll get your work done when you need to get it done, and everyone's willing to chip in. We had a team member a few years ago. She lost one of her parents in death while she was with us. And we don't have any set bereavement. Like you take off what you need to take off. It's not going to be like, oh, you get 2 days or whatever the case is. It was just you take off what you need to take off. And I think she needed to take off like a couple of weeks, and that was fine. And everyone just kind of understood, and we chipped in and, we covered, and it was just like, oh, I'm going to need a few more days. Take a few more days, right? And it's that kind of mentality, that life first mentality, like that's where the value is, right? That was the point of differentiation. And I think making sure that we don't lose sight of that moving forward, of how valuable that can be, because we've had a lot of team members that could have and probably still can make more money going to a large organization. A lot of them have backgrounds in large organizations, Fortune 500, Fortune 100, but they choose this because they say, having this time to be and this latitude is more important to me than maybe, making those extra dollars or getting those extra benefits or whatever the case may happen to be. And when you find that person that's what matters to them, well, that's what makes that person a Panda, right? That's what aligns them with who we are. That's what creates that sense of unity among the team. And it ends up, again, further feeding into that core value.
Shamir, you've shared so many great things that your team is doing already, but I would like for you to maybe share one just awesome thing that your team is working on right now. You talked about all the great things you're doing around culture building, around really leaning into your core competencies as an organization. But, when we get in the weeds of the work, what's one thing that, you guys are really killing it at right now?
Great question. I think one of the things that's really been important to us that we feel like is a differentiator for us, and it's one of those things it's hard to market, right, and hard to communicate because it's like everybody says that kind of thing. It's one of the things you have to experience is the experience our clients have with us is really important. We feel like we can deliver a really great experience to our clients. Can we deliver better services, in terms of actual marketing services than other people? That's debatable. I'm sure there's agencies out there who do better than we do in that respect, but we feel like the thing that we can really control and excel in isn't the kind of experience that we deliver to our clients. So we try to find ways to do that, to tell ourselves, how are we giving them a better story? How are we making their lives a little bit easier? How are we kind of taking on the burden? And how are we kind of adjusting and adapting our processes to make things a bit easier for them, to be more communicative? So it's like little things, right? So it's like some agencies are like, oh, can we connect, with you in Slack? And the organization's like, well, we don't use Slack, we use Teams. And it's like, all right, well, okay, we can't connect. Well, we have Slack, Teams, and Meet. So which one do you want to use? Like, we'll use any one that makes sense for you. If your organization's on Teams, we'll connect on Teams. If they're on Slack, we'll connect on Slack, right? So kind of meeting them where they are, because again, we're trying to make things easier for them, right? So we have to kind of lead from that perspective and make those choices. And I think that's something that we've, again, really focused on getting back to here of late, and are trying to do that by making those little choices and saying, again, do you want to talk on Slack or Teams? Do you want a Zoom call or a Google Meet call? Like we can do either one. Like, which one works better for you and your organization, right? So making those little choices that just make things a little bit more straightforward for them. And we're constantly kind of looking at our experience and how we deliver that and how do we make it a little bit smoother and create less friction for our clients, so that we kind of really kind of win them over, right? And develop that relationship with them that I think ultimately is what, again, sets us apart and creates that sense of loyalty. It's funny, we talked about losing that large client. We got them back, right? A year later, we really feel like a part of that was because I always say you can't go back to the farm once you've seen Perry, right? So, they switched another agency that they didn't have a great experience. And that kind of helped us because it kind of showed, hey, the experience that they had with us was very different. And it just highlighted that to them, when they made that change. So that they ended up coming back and saying, hey, we like this experience better. So that was for us a big kind of high five moment, between ourselves to kind of say, hey, look, our experience is different. It is making a difference and it's accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish.
I think there's a lot to be said for losing a client and then winning the client back. Because when you think about offboarding a client, some companies make the mistake of letting the client experience, letting your values falter in that exit process. And it could very easily tarnish the relationship and close that door forever. So it sounds like you had a very effective process that was grounded in your values for offboarding that client, even though there might have been some friction in the relationship, enough so that they had enough trust in your process to come back. How did you feel when you were able to welcome that client back? Did you feel like you needed to re-earn their trust, or how did you feel?
No, quite the contrary. I think it was more that the trust that we had built over the time that we had with them initially was so strong that it was an easy decision for them to come back, right? So, and again, that speaks to building a relationship, like a meaningful relationship. So it felt good that the word isn't justify, it really solidified for us the fact that the effort and energy we put into that experience, those experiences that we have with our client, that they actually pay off. And that's when things pay off, right? Not so much in the short term, it's more in the mid and long term, right? It's the long-term benefits of things. And that's hard as a small business owner, because a lot of times you don't have the luxury and time to wait, for the mid and long term, because you don't have the bank account and the coffers of a Walmart or a Disney or a large organization that can afford to lose hundreds of millions of dollars in a year or in a quarter or in a month and be like, but they're still operating, small business owner, you don't do that, right? I mean, you have a bad week and that can completely throw you amiss, never mind a bad month. But to be able to say, hey, look, this is what matters to us and this is what matters. And we have to kind of believe in that. And for lack of a better word, we have to put faith in that and trust that it's going to kind of work out in the end. And when we saw it kind of work out in that way, I think that for us was really solidifying of like, yeah, we're making the right decisions and leaning into that. Let's continue to lean into that and keep that as a key part of who we are.
Shamir, on the flip side of that question around what your team is doing really well, when we're doing well as a company, growth naturally comes as a result of that. And then with growth comes bottlenecks. Things start to break. There's inefficiencies that everyone has to fix, right? So, where are you feeling those bottlenecks, those gaps when it comes to operating the business?
Yeah, great question. It's funny. We just talked about this. We had a meeting all together maybe about a month ago, and we talked about this a lot. It really is around resourcing. It's just understanding the right time to bring on additional help and additional resources, especially when we know because of past experience how picky we want to be about who we bring on board. So it's not an easy or fast thing to do. So one of the things we're looking at is, okay, well, do we really need additional resources? Or are there things that we could be doing to make our processes smoother and easier and faster? Can we be taking more advantage of automation and AI to take the ease off the more mundane tasks and allow us to better utilize our existing resources, right? Just to kind of shift things around so that instead of having resource A spend 30% of their time or 35% of their time on mundane tasks, is there a way to automate that? Is there a way to make that significantly faster, leveraging tools like AI so that we can now take that 35% and say, okay, now we don't have to worry about that. Now we can take that and use that somewhere else. And if you do that across 3 people, well, you just created a person, right? You took 1/3 times 3 and you effectively created a person. So, hey, let's be smarter about what we're doing, which is one of our core values to work smarter, not harder. And let's lean into that particular core value and let's find ways to solve those problems a bit more intelligently by leveraging some of the things that the market and technology is allowing us to do. So we started spending some time mapping out, okay, what are the things that really eat up time? Okay, great. We found the top 3. Is there ways to automate this? Is there ways to leverage AI to do that? Let's map out what that looks like. Let's get an MVP going of what that looks like. And then let's iterate on top of that MVP. So when we do that, we're getting those small wins and trying to solve those problems. Because one thing I've definitively learned as a small business owner, and this happens both across resources and processes, the weakest link always comes to the top. So maybe you have a bad team member, for an example, and they're just causing problems and they're making everyone's life more difficult and more challenging and eating up time. So you say, okay, finally, let's move on from this person. This isn't a good fit. Let's move on. So you move on from that person and you think, okay, great, everything's better. But then not too much long later, maybe a month, maybe 2, then this other thing kind of rises. That was always there. It just wasn't number 1. It was number 2. And it was overshadowed by this number 1 issue, which was this person. Well, now maybe this other person, or this other process is number 2 on the list, but it now is moved into number 1. So that the weak link always ends up surfacing itself. It just always ends up coming to the top. And that's a good thing because then you know what to kind of attack, right? You just keep saying, okay, what's coming to the top? Okay, let's isolate that. Let's get down to the root cause of what that issue is. Let's attack that issue. Let's address it. And then, okay, what's going to come up next? Because something's going to come up. Because there's always going to be a weak link. You're never at perfect equilibrium. Like no organization is. You can't be. I mean, maybe if you're a bunch of clones or something, I don't know, but I mean, you can't be at perfect equilibrium. So, you take the weakest point in, the weakest link in the chain. I don't mean that to say it has to be a person because often cases it's not a person. Again, it could be an old process of like, why are we still doing this like this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And it could be just changing that process or that procedure or our outlook or a product, or it can be a lot of things. It doesn't need to be a person, but there's some weak point and it's going to show itself. You just have to kind of keep your eyes open and not turn a blind eye to it and kind of say, okay, this is a weak point. The market is telling us this is weak. Competitors are telling us this is weak. Whatever the case is, now let's address it and deal with it and not kind of ignore it and move on.
Shamir, what results are you focused on delivering for next quarter? So what are some of your growth goals for the second half of the year?
Yeah. So right now, our big focus is really on making a shift toward demand generation, right? How do we position ourselves in the market to create more inbound with really our goal of being, hey, let's be in a position where we get to choose our clients and not kind of chasing after them. So that means highlighting our role in the market in terms of what services we do and we don't offer, how we think about our services, what frameworks we're putting out there, defining our brand and what our brand is and what our brand isn't, and having a much stronger brand presence, doing those things that will help us to kind of stand out and end up kind of becoming a bit of an earworm in, when it comes to our target ICP, so that we do come top of mind when they have a particular need. Because again, it's about thinking long term. It's about sustainable growth, right? And you always have to play the short term game. Has a small business, but we can't ever lose sight of the long term, because then you're just on the hamster wheel, and there's no joy in that, right? It's just like why am I doing this? If I'm just going to be doing this, then I might as well just get a 9 to 5 job and call it a day. Like, this is pointless. So if we've created these organizations in order to say, for us, meet our first core value of saying, hey, it's life first. We want to have control of our lives and do what we want to do. Then that means that we have to kind of put ourselves in a position where we can protect that, or we can build a bit of a moat and protect that. And for us, that moat is saying, how are we different? We focus on high consideration brands. We focus on the post-click experience. We're kind of anti-advertising, not to say you don't need advertising, but just to say that we don't want marketers like addicted to advertising the way that we feel like many of them are now, where Meta and Google and LinkedIn position themselves as like the answer to all problems, and it just becomes about let's spend our way out of it situation, right? So how do we articulate that, get that message out in the marketplace and that thought out in the marketplace, and use that as a means by which to differentiate ourselves, to stand out as thought leaders, and then use that to hopefully generate some inbound. So really this year and this next quarter is really going to be about further refining and defining that strategy and that brand and what that needs to look like, so that we can begin to iteratively kind of evolve into more of that brand and further stand out in the marketplace.
Shamir, this was such a great conversation. What an impressive company you and your co-founders have built. Just very much a people-first organization that's doing very innovative work. I love to wrap up my conversations with each guest by asking them what their one bright idea is. So a bright idea could be a mindset shift, a strategy, a tool, a book, a podcast. You've already kind of shared a couple, but if something else comes to mind, what would be the one bright idea that you would leave with the audience?
It's funny. It is about books, but it's about books plural and not book singular. So one of my business partners, he gave me this book to read, and it sat in my nightstand for I don't know how long, maybe a couple of years. And I finally read it, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, this gives a great framework. Like, this is what we need to do. And we started to implement the framework. But as I was reading the book, one of the things I noticed is that it referenced a lot of other books, like Good to Great, Jim Collins, which then made a great by choice. And then what I started doing was just consuming all kinds of books, just like reading constantly all kinds of books about business, books about marketing, books about people management, books about psychology, just all kinds of books, just consuming all these books. And eventually from doing that, I was able to kind of pick the pieces and parts of these different thoughts and philosophies and strategies and so forth that made the most sense for Smart Panda Labs, and kind of create my own framework from that borrows elements from a number of these different thought leaders around business or psychology or wherever the case happens to be. So I think one of the things that's super critical for any small business owner is the importance of education. And I don't mean like education necessarily like taking a class or getting a degree. I mean like this constant need to continue to kind of learn and really kind of fill your mind with things that your mind can then 3 weeks from now, 3 months from now, or 3 years from now draw from, because there's more for your mind to work with, to problem solve, right? To iterate, to evolve, and to grow. And the more that you feed your mind and give it to work with, the more different directions your mind's able to go, the more you can kind of see around corners, the more you can kind of anticipate how things are going to go. So I think that's my big tip is just become this avid reader. Just continue to devour information and let your brain kind of do what's designed to do, which is to process that information, to see how different things can kind of fit together in a way, and then model that for your organization and your business and your goals and what you're trying to do, so that you end up getting a very well-rounded view of where things are, where you want things to go.
If there are people in the audience who want to learn more about Smart Panda Labs and get in contact with you, where can they find you?
Sure, they can find me if they want to follow me on LinkedIn. As you mentioned, Shamir Duverseau. If you find another one on LinkedIn, good luck. Or they can certainly visit us at smartpandalabs.com on our website, or find Smart Panda Labs on LinkedIn as well.
Great conversation, Shamir. Thank you so much for joining us on the Bright Ideas podcast. We loved having you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it and enjoyed the time.
Thanks for tuning in to Bright Ideas. If today's episode gave you something to think about, here's your next step. DM me the word growth on LinkedIn to start a conversation about how we can help you scale smarter. And if you're a founder, CEO, or senior talent leader with a story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out about joining me on a future episode. And if you don't want to miss future conversations, be sure to follow the show, leave a quick rating, and download your favorite episodes to take them on the go. Your support helps more leaders discover bright ideas. Until next time, be bold, be resilient, be sharp. I'm Desiree B. Sharp.